So we've already had a lecture titled War in Europe. This lecture is about the war in Europe once America is involved. And really, once America gets involved, a couple things change. Um, we fight a war from the air. Um, Huge bombing campaigns by the English and the Americans over Germany, by the Germans over England. We institute a system called carpet bombing, and this is where huge amounts of bombs are dropped over wide areas. The worst thing about carpet bombing done by both sides in the war is often lots of civilians get killed, and you can see this is an aerial view of an area getting carpet bombed. I think it's Dresden at night. Hamburg, Germany, for instance, 40,000 civilians died in carpet bombing. We hit strategic areas, but which are areas used for military, but because they were instanced amongst civilian areas and carpet bombing hit such a huge area, we hit the areas we targeted, but we also hit civilian areas. And really, carpet bombing is used to break the will of the German people, or for the Germans, of the English people, to fight. Next slide. And I think we're going to talk next about the Soviet Union getting back involved. Now, once the Germans were pushed out of Africa, they were in a desperate need of resources, in particular oil they expected to get in Africa. There are huge oil fields in southern Russia, or the Soviet Union at that time. So Hitler broke his agreement with the USSR and invaded, which is a problem. The USSR is the largest country in Europe. There are more people living in the USSR. It's an uneducated workforce. So inside they had these huge oil reserves. They had huge oil reserves inside the Soviet Union, and Hitler needed them. He wanted them and he needed them. They used, of course, the Blitzkrieg, the quick-moving army to invade Russia. 3.6 million soldiers from the Axis, made up of the Italians and the Germans and Austrians and Czechoslovakians, all moved into Russia. The problem was Russia has not treated its people very well, the Soviet Union, so lots of people were really happy to see the Germans come. They were happy to see the Germans take over their area. Unfortunately, they found out that the Germans treated them horribly, and gypsies, Jews, Catholics were all rounded up, and Orthodox, religious orthodoxy people were rounded up and shipped off to concentration camps. Next slide. The Soviets, as they retreated, when the Germans came in, the Soviets' plan was to pull the Germans further and further into Germany. So as they retreated, the Germans followed them. They followed a policy called scorched earth, which means that they destroyed everything the Germans could use. They destroyed rail lines. They burned fields. They destroyed structures. Nothing for the Germans to use. Because their plan was, if they can pull the Germans into Germany, into Russia, real far, into the Soviet Union, they could do exactly what they did to Napoleon when Napoleon from France invaded. Let the very harsh Soviet winter take its course on the Germans. Americans began to pour supplies in to help the Russians. Next slide. The Battle of Stalingrad, some say, is the turning point in the war. Definitely one of the main turning points in the war in Europe, and probably the most important battle, definitely the most important battle on the Eastern Front, which was between the Soviet Union and the Germans. They bombed Stalingrad, the Germans did, to rubble. The Soviets took up positions instant amongst the wreckage. The Germans surrounded the city so nothing could get in or out, although there was one side of the city which was on a lake, which the Germans did not surround, but the rest of the city was completely surrounded. Fighting was kind of like a video game, house to house, little sections of 4 or 5 guys going street by street, block by block, house by house, looking for snipers, rooting out the enemy. Let's stop this part of the lecture and go on to the next.